So I believe we are designed to do it. I believe that we are designed with sight, not just eyesight. We are designed to live intuitively, to sense the movement in probabilities and possibilities around us, to sense the ones that have the highest voltage for us, to sense when we're feeling dissonance. We are designed to do it.
Dani Van De Velde. Dani is a healer, psychic medium, meditation teacher, writer, and the force behind spirited living.
I think the first is to really understand the mind-body energy system that we are, and to really understand the nature and the application of our awareness and consciousness. And to do that, we need to train. It's always through meditation. If you can't master your mind, you can't perceive your scale of awareness, and therefore what other information and energy is flagging to you there.
So let's dive in with Dani. Welcome, Dani. I'm so excited to finally have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, it's been a slow burner, and I have to say I'm not used to still, after all this time, not being in Singapore.
I know. Time flies, but I love how we've always kept in touch over the years, and our paths keep crossing. It's always just meant to be, isn't it?
Yep, I agree.
So take us back to the beginning, because you come from a big corporate world in your earlier career. What really first drew you into more of the meditation and spiritual practice, and how is that journey shaped since the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, okay. Oof, that's a big timeline. So I think I would start with, I grew up in a spiritual home. So my family are traditional Catholics, and so Catholicism really introduced me to ritual, the power of prayer, the power of song, and symbolism, and also just an innate understanding that there is something beyond what we see as our mundane everyday life. And so, for many people that start later on a spiritual journey, some of those things are the things that need to be adopted and understood. But I think from the get-go, I had that. And then I always had like a voracious appetite to understand more. I was one of those little girls that was like, but why? But why? which drove my mum insane. And I found as I grew up, I wasn't really getting the answers satisfactorily in a way that sort of assuaged my curiosity from my faith of origin. And so from a pretty early age, I started to explore. So I found my way to a local ashram where I got a lot of answers around the breath, brain, nervous system, energy system connection, the power of mantra and mudra, and all of those beautiful sort of Vedic practices. Generally, it was such Ananda yoga. So we did do asana, but it was more a spiritual approach to the yogic practices, and lots of sangha, lots of talks. Is beautiful. And I read a lot, but I was sort of really finding my way through books, through going to the ashram as often as I could, and through my own sort of exploration. But always a seeker right from the get-go, and also sensing things, and I feel like all of us had an element of this in our childhood, but then we get jammed into the educational route, and we go right up into the mind and logic and competition, and we can dull our senses to some of that. But I think all of us would remember a time, when we were little, particularly out in nature, where that rock just had something special to it, or that stick, or that feather, or the breeze felt magical, or the moon, or I don't think I've ever lost that. I still bring home sticks and feathers. But my mum as well, she, while she was quite a strict Catholic, she's also an artist, and she really encouraged my writing of poetry from when I was little, my love of the wilderness, my love of cycles and seasons. And so underneath the magic was always there, even though from the outside looking in, it was a very strict sort of Catholic family.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And a lot of the work I do is on the feminine, the masculine, but when it's only when you're in your feminine, when you slow down and you receive and you open your eyes and you're curious of the world around you, like you have continued to do since you were a kid, instead of as, easy to get in the masculine, do, tunnel vision, not even being present or listening to ourselves, let alone what's messages that we're getting from around us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think it's about a balance because while we need that receptivity and that felt sentient engagement with life, we also do need the intellect and to be able to make it useful.
Yeah, get shit done.
Yeah, it's done exactly. Yeah, and that was really the other side of my upbringing was I was like we were really well educated. All of the kids, I've got 3 siblings. We went to brilliant schools. We went on. Most of us have got several degrees, and we were really sort of raised for high business and success, and we're all quite ambitious as well. And so I followed that trajectory. Yet at the same time, I had kind of my woo-woo inner hidden side that was continually evolving and growing at the same time. And then it did get to a point in my life where it was creating a wobble. And, I was very successful in the corporate world but the more success and the more suits and the more travel and the more brilliant exercises and projects and things that I was working on, the less meaning it held for me. And so there did come a point actually right sort of at the peak of my career where I decided to exit. And I didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew that I needed a sense of purpose. And I knew that what lit me up was my spiritual practice and understanding and experimenting with mind, with consciousness, and with healing.
When that feeling comes calling, I used to run a PR agency, and you want to do more meaningful work. And when it starts knocking on your door and it's louder and louder and louder until you really can't ignore it, and you have to rip the plaster off. And like you say, I did well in my agency. You were at the top of your career doing very well. And it takes some balls to do that. So everyone's like, oh, what's she doing? She's doing so well. But if you're deeply unhappy and you don't feel like you're living your true purpose, then that's when you have to be brave and make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you ignore that tapping, it will start to tap in louder and louder ways, and often through the body, So leading up to the exiting work every time, and I'm not a sickly, I don't get sick, but I would be continually losing my voice, and I clocked it. I was like, this is not the arena for my voice anymore. Like my voice is already checked out, and so that was quite interesting too. But the exit was interesting because at the time I was really diving into manifestation work, which, as you know now, I teach a big global community, and we have an annual process called the Mind and Magic of Manifesting. So, and I was really into that early days, and I applied some of those principles to the exit of my career, and I write about this in my book. I had this sort of seminal moment. I was based in London, and over the Christmas holidays, I was on the beach in Sydney in Australia where my home is, and I'd written my resignation letter. And I went back into the office in London and saw my CEO, and he opened the door to his office. This is in the days we didn't have open plans, so we're talking a while ago now. And he opened the door to his office, and we both said, oh, we need to talk. And he said, ladies before gentlemen, and I said, age before beauty. And so he spoke first, and he said, there's been a restructure. We're moving back into regional roles. At that stage, I had a global responsibility. And he said, we can offer you Europe, or we can offer you a redundancy. And I don't think he even finished the word redundancy. And I was like, option B.
Wow.
And he said, what do you want to talk to me about? I said, it's totally fine. Because if I had resigned first, I wouldn't then have had a lovely redundancy, which then gave me time to recalibrate, to start to get my bearings and intuit my direction forward from there. So, you know, there was definitely, it was the spiritual movement in the exit from the career, which I love. But of course, I'm back in corporates now. So I do well-being and breath work and, talks around understanding energetic dissonance and the intuitive mind and so on in corporate. So that background serves me now with what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, amazing. What a story. And when it comes, like, going back to, you mentioned woo-woo and spirituality, for people that haven't explored spirituality, what does that actually mean to live spiritually in everyday life?
So I think it's a number of components. And I think the first is to really understand the mind-body energy system that we are, and to really understand the nature and the application of our awareness and consciousness. And to do that, we need to train. So there's no simple way around that. And the reason why we need to train is because our modern world, our education system, the fight for survival, the race against time, all of this stuff that we're really sort of like entrained into keeps us very much pegged on the obvious, the material, again, pegged in slave to time. And yet this is one aspect of living, and we tend to override those intuitive signals, that sharper guidance, because we're just going with what's obvious. And so we're all born with the same set of intuitive and psychic senses, but we don't utilize them unless we're lucky enough to grow up in like a family or a culture of origin that recognizes them and that develops them. And so we have to retrain ourselves back into our full spectrum of awareness. And that's where I really start with my clients. And it's always through meditation. If you can't master your mind, you can't perceive your scale of awareness, and therefore what other information and energy is flagging to you there. So that would be the initial building block. And of course, we know with regular meditation, whether it be breath work or whatever it is, mindfulness meditation, you heal. So your body responds super positively to it. So your nervous system regulates, you get to a position with enough practice that you can regulate yourself at will. Your immune function becomes very strong. That's what I mentioned before. I don't get sick. I just don't. And your cognitive capacity becomes much more enlivened as well. And all of those things give you a very different attitude towards life, because the struggle lessens. And then from there, you have this capacity. So I sort of talk about it like it's not linear, but the way that I talk about it is we tend to go on this sort of transformative journey, where we move from reactive to responsive. So we're not ninja kicking life, but we've sort of got enough of a pause point that we've cultivated where we go, okay, oof, that's interesting. How will I respond to that with some discernment and choice, which has a radically different effect on our stress hormones and so on. And then with continued practice, and when we move more into the mysticism, we come to understand that we're all interconnected. And all of us have experiences of this on the flash, but it starts to become a state of being. And that's where I say we move from responsive to expansive. And this is where I would say at the point where perhaps you and I started to realize that we needed purpose, and what motivated us was meaning, and often helping other people. And then further along the train, there is expansive to creative. So this is a point in your spiritual journey where you start to really collude with the creative forces that are at play around you and ally with them and direct the trajectory of your life. And this is where we would probably go into more of the magical arts, the psychic sciences. This is where mediumship kicks in, and where you really you lay down your weapons with yourself and with life. You don't need them anymore because there's nothing happening to you. There's a deep understanding and recognition that it's all happening for you and it's issuing from you.
Yeah.
So it's not linear, and we move around those states of being. But I would say that would be my best explanation today of what it is to live a spirited life.
Yeah, and it's, it's helpful in our life in general, in our relationships at work, making key decisions, that slowing down, using your intuition. And when you say we're all interconnected, can you explain and tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we are obviously within a dualistic consciousness, and we need to be to operate. We need night and day, right and wrong, on and off, good and bad, and hopefully as we mature, a good moral compass to allow us to move through that. But the spiritual reality, which is referenced and taught in all major world religions and the esoteric arms of those religions as well, is that we're all actually one thing. So we are unique refractions of one living mind or one field of consciousness. So, and often modern day mystics will use the language of quantum physics to try to explain that, because it's a good language.
People like science and relate to science.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's talking about the same thing, to be honest. I quite like using gaming analogy. I've got teenagers. So I sort of explain it like we're all in a multiplayer virtual reality game. And we know that the personality and the ego, which is equally as divine and equally as important, is really kind of like an avatar. And who we really are is a much broader, much more eternal, which leads us into mediumship at some point, grand being. And we're beaming in through an avatar of Linda or Dani and beaming in on this podcast because we've chosen to explore some ideas together.
Fascinating. And talking about you becoming a psychic medium as well, because that kind of happened by a bit of an accident because you were just becoming more aware and it came natural to you. And I experienced that accidentally because I was just coming to you for a Reiki session, and this was many, many years ago. And I remember, you were touching my head and you said, I can feel someone coming through my left. And I didn't book you in to do any psychic mediumship at all. But I remember you saying, I can feel someone speaking to me in my left ear. They're sending me a message, but we'll talk about it at the end. And that's all you said. And we sat down and you said, was this your father's name, John? And I literally fell off my seat. And you passed on a short, brief message from him. Obviously, it passed away 25 years ago. But it's not something that people kind of get and understand. That again, they think it's this woo-woo thing, Ouija boards and all that kind of nonsense. But it's not. I think for you just got so connected with yourself and with the creative forces out there that it naturally unfolded for you.
I started to perceive it, and I think we all can, and I think we all do, but we don't have a frame of reference for it. And so I think if you speak to anyone who's had a loved one who's passed over, they will say that they dreamt of them, but the dream felt very different. Or little shiny coins or feathers that they associate with that person are in their path. And these are all movements of the spirit realm. But I certainly didn't intend to go into psychic mediumship, but what I started to perceive, I loved Reiki. I love Reiki. I love it. I teach it. I'm an Usui Reiki master teacher. I've taught, I think, about 120 other healers now. Like, I love it. And, but Reiki is a higher, more harmonic frequency to how we might be just rolling on the ground day to day. And what I started to observe is, and I got very busy very quickly with my healing work. So I was actually running Reiki a lot through my system. Reiki doesn't come from the practitioner, it comes through them, which is great because you participate in the healing and the uplift. But I started to notice that the more Reiki I ran, the more psychically I could read what was going on with the client. And so, at the end of the session, like we did, I would say something like, are you aware that you've got heavy metals in your system? And they'll go, I just got my bloods back yesterday and there were heavy metals in them, or something that might have happened in their childhood, which was traumatic. So not mediumship, but very accurate psychic reading. And I thought, wow, that's super interesting. Like, there is definitely a correlation between raising your frequency, which for me was happening through Reiki, but which we can do through meditation, through rituals, through sound baths, there's so many ways to do it. And my psychic perception becoming much more accurate, much more acute. And so I don't teach Reiki on its own now. I teach a course called Intuitive Healing, which is the certified Reiki, but also psychic development and intuitive coaching to go with it. But then that continued. And so I think, how long ago do you reckon our session was?
It was pre-COVID, I reckon 6-7 years ago.
Okay. So I think that I was also, as that process was happening, getting mediumistic contact, which for the listeners who aren't sure what that is, it's not channeling. Like, I'm not channeling an archangel or anything like that. My mind is perceiving a communication from a loved one who's passed over, who's no longer incarnate. And I think that was happening quite a bit, but I didn't really know what it was. So like for yours, for example, I knew it was your dad. I knew his name was John, and I knew that he had something very pertinent for this healing session, which I believe it was from memory. You know, he was saying, I never left you, you know, and it was beautiful. But I just didn't know what to do with it, but I was fascinated by it. So I just went out and found the best teacher in the world, basically, and started stalking her, Christine Morgan, who I've been with now for 5 years, and I'm in a weekly development group with her. I now bring her to Singapore, and we do demonstrations and workshops and teach it together. And I started to develop that capacity of awareness to connect with the spirit realm, and now I offer that. So if you go onto my when you went onto my website, it was just like, come and get Reiki, but now it's get Reiki, get a psychic read, connect with your loved ones, and I can do it reliably now, and in a way that I can hold the responsibility of it. It's a huge responsibility if someone comes in and they're grieving, and you can't give them any BS. Like, it's unconscionable to do that. And a lot of people out there are doing that, and I can't stand it. So the form of mediumship that I pursue is called psychic evidential mediumship. So what that means is that the people in spirit will communicate psychically, like a thought that goes through my mind. I don't see them in the room or anything like that. I can feel them like I felt your dad. And I can perceive through thought what they're communicating. And I've learnt the difference between, is it my thought or is it a living mind communicating? So that's the psychic bit of the name. And then evidential is I have to deliver to my clients information, memories, characteristics, looks that are evidence, absolute evidence that this is their loved one in spirit. So it can't be generic. It can't be, your grandmother's here, she's wearing an apron, she loves you, because that like hits about 90% of the world's grandmothers.
But you're right, though. You do have a responsibility in this realm that you work in, you know, to show up as your full self and provide that authentic service. And you're right, providing the evidence there as well is crucial. And I mean, without getting into it, because it's, you know, I know you teach this, but that next level of awareness that it takes to become in that psychic realm, how do you even get there?
So I believe it's relatively easy because I believe we are designed to do it. So I believe that we are designed with sight, not just eyesight. We are designed to live intuitively, to sense the movement in probabilities and possibilities around us, to sense the ones that have the highest voltage for us, to sense when we're feeling dissonance. We are designed to do it. And so the first thing, as I said before, like any kind of spiritual exploration, is you've got to cultivate a bit of mastery, because otherwise it's all mushy and you can't really determine. But with some mastery of your awareness, you can also start to perceive vibrational energy. And that's what you're sensing when you are psychically reading someone or doing mediumistic contact. The primary sense, first and foremost, is clairsentience. You feel it. And then depending on what your design is and what your tendencies are, your system will translate it into either you'll see something in your mind's eye or you'll hear a word. The other clairs, clairvoyance, clairaudience. But the primary sense is feeling. And I think that's where people can start. So they can really just keep a lovely, gentle and continual observation of what exactly they're feeling, and asking ourselves that, like if you're in a meeting and something's, just if you actually just sit to yourself and just go, what am I feeling here? It will be revealed into your mind if you allow it, and so getting used to leaning into your felt intelligence, I think that's the way to do it. And there's so many beautiful ways that you can do that. Nature exposure I think, is one of the best ways to do it. But there are lots of ways you can do that. And then learning how to raise and move your frequency. And I'm doing that because I think heart-centered meditations and contemplations like gratitude, awe and wonder, loving kindness, altruism, like we've got all the stats psychologically on that, how good those things are for us. But I think they also open us up to moving our frequency into finer levels, which is where the more subtle information can be perceived.
If you love PSI Love Me and want to dive in deeper, then join the Evolve Woman, my 8-week online coaching program, which will take you on a transformative journey of self-discovery, fulfillment, and to find the joy and love you so deserve. Check out my Instagram, Linda Williams Coach, to find out more.
It's so interesting. And it's that allowing, isn't it? It's that curiosity and allowing and not letting the head brain go, oh, don't be so silly. That's not happening right now. But that inner knowing and feeling and letting yourself be guided. It's interesting. My partner's father passed away a couple of weeks ago. And unfortunately, he ended up in hospital a week later. And John is a straightforward talk, down to earth Yorkshireman, calls a spade a spade. And he said, I found my father in the hospital today. When he was sat there waiting for his blood tests, he said, I'm not being funny, but I felt him. I felt his hand on my shoulder, and he was open to that. And it was like his father was there with him in hospital, kind of giving him a bit of support and care, really.
Right. Yeah. Like, that's super beautiful. And that's very common, in my mediumistic work with my clients, is if you are going through, an event in your life which is a little bit scary, and no doubt, given your partner's dad had passed only recently, he probably had emotion with being in a hospital anyway, with some associated stuff. So he may have been thinking of his dad too, and that allows our loved ones to actually draw quite close, and that bond doesn't die when the body dies. Like it's mediumship work is just the most beautiful work. It's very healing, but I would say that was not just your partner comforting himself. That was a real contact. That really was his father going, I'm here with you, buddy,
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. Like you say, when we do tap into that, it offers insight and healing and understanding as well. So let's dive into a little bit more magic, which what I can't wait to talk about is your latest podcast season, 21st Century Witchcraft. And, when people again think of witchcraft, they think of pointy hats. They think of I think of the witch trials, actually, close to me in Lancaster Castle. It's 10th, 11th century where the actual witch trials were held. There's a lot of history on it. And of course, if witches sank, they were innocent. But if they floated, they were guilty and were killed anyway. And I have my own conclusion to all of this. I just feel like women had this superpower intuition, and they were becoming, people couldn't understand it. And men were becoming threatened by all of this, and they felt like they had to do something about it. I mean, that's my conclusion to what was going on how many, hundreds of years ago. But tell me, what is 21st century witchcraft, and what does it look like in practice?
So, well, the podcast is the 21st Century Witch, and the reason why I wanted to bring on very vetted, very well established, solid practitioners in the craft is to de-wooify the craft and provide a modern narrative around what it is to be a witch, because the pointy hats that you talk about, the Halloween-y stuff, you think about how witches are portrayed in Hollywood, cackling green, wart on the end of the nose, malevolent, eating babies, causing harm. This perception of the witch is the remnants of the 600-year-old propaganda campaign to dislodge women from powerful positions within societies.
So my conclusion was right without even reading into this. I was like, I bet it's because of that.
It was political. So, and uncontainable. So, prior to Christianity, if you look at where the main witch trials kicked off, which is in sort of Druidic Britain, and then they spread to the north through Scandinavia, and then later, into the Americas as well. But those societies pre-Christendom honoured a goddess, and the women played really pivotal roles within the community. Like this is where the wise crone type archetype comes from. The old Irish courts, or the male kings were only coronated by the court witch. The witches were the doulas, the midwives, the healers. They provided the counsel, and the cultures at that time were very connected with the cycles of nature, with the intelligence of nature. So they were all sort of animistic cultures where they believed that the earth was sentient and that we were children within that beautiful, complex, interconnected beauty. And so there's sort of old Celtic rituals of Beltane and the Neolithic structures that are aligned with solstices and so on, right through the British Isles and Ireland. We're all filled with spirals and circles and seeds, like rather than crosses and lines and swords, and so for a new era of Christendom, which is largely misogynistic, and because there were women at play within all the Christian myths, but they were kind of edited out or silenced, or rebranded like a prostitute or something. And also the politics of Rome were all male-driven, and also they relied on some kind of an agency between you and the divine. It was an incredible commercial machine, and it still is today, where you need to pay for an agent to do the deal with the divine for you. And the pre-Christian cults and goddess cults and communities, you mainlined it. So it was hugely threatening to the incoming of the new era, new political systems, which also brought good things too, like institutional education, infrastructure in cities, sanitation, organised healthcare. Like there was obviously a lot of masculine structure and stuff, which was really important. But the mode of the time was eliminate anything or assume it and rebrand it. And so, there are a lot of prayers within the Catholic Mass. There are a lot of symbols, like if you look at the medieval churches around France, around Europe, there are some very old esoteric pre-Christian symbolism embedded into the rocks and the carvings and so on. So it's a very clever strategy that if you want to assume populations into your company, you assume and just rebrand their gods, call them saints. St. Bridget's a great example of that. She's a pagan goddess, which was rebranded to St. Bridget. You destroy their wells or you build churches on top of their sacred sites. So there's still a familiarity, and it's the only choice given to them because their other elders have been eliminated. But to do that, it was a massive propaganda campaign. So, there was a book which was written, I'm going to get all of this wrong. It was written by a German bishop, I think around the late 1500s, called the Malus Maleficarum, which is the hammer of the witches, which was a step-by-step guide on how to torture and murder the women in a village who held any power. And even if they didn't confess, but they was regarded as suspects, their lands would be confiscated because women were pre-Christendom, could own their own land. They didn't have to be married. They didn't rely on a man. Of course, a lot of women chose to, but lands confiscated, assets confiscated, imprisoned, or publicly tortured to start to create fear and fealty to the new system. So, the Malus Maleficarum and the witch's hat, which is interesting. So it comes from the Malus Maleficarum, but it's based on a much earlier version that was written to identify, accuse, and eliminate pagans and Jews. So hundreds of years prior to the witch trials, pagans and Jews were the targets, and Jewish people were required to wear a tall, pointy black hat, so shopkeepers and in the markets could identify them and refuse their custom. And the Malus Maleficarum was just basically a cut and paste of that earlier version, and the witches' hats came with that. And so, yet still today, we have people who are afraid of it, who think it's demonic, who think that it causes harm, who think that witches are, working with the devil and and all of that sort of stuff. And Hollywood propagates it and social media propagates it. And so that's why I wanted to speak with, really solid practitioners who could explain some of their worldview, their self-view, and how they work with magic in their lives. And it's been my most popular season yet. It's gone nuts.
I bet it has, because it's all about unpacking, as women, I do, and I might get tomatoes thrown at me for this, but I do feel that women do have a deeper sense of knowing and intuition than men, in my experience. But maybe it's because men are more, they're in the masculine world, they're in the doing world, and whereas women have more opportunity to tap into that inner knowing, that spiritual wisdom, they tend to slow down a little bit more than guys. I mean, that might have been a natural evolution of how we've taken our roles over the years. But as you say, the witchcraft was that punishment for having that power, of having that knower, for having that inner wisdom and higher spirituality. So it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm not surprised people are, eating your podcast for breakfast in terms of spirituality and the so-called witchcraft, because I think in today's modern world, everyone's feeling a bit discombobulated, a bit unsettled. Politics, war, starvation, it's all going on right now. You turn the news on and you're just like, what the hell's going on? And it's, where I think everyone's looking for more meaning and purpose in life and understanding of us as a human race as well. It's like, how can it have got to this? So what are you seeing in your work? What's really resonating with people at the moment?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think we've just had in the last sort of 5 years, like this perfect storm of disruption.
Yeah.
And it's and one of the big results of that is a growing distrust in the current systems. So distrust in the media, distrust in the news, what we're being told, how we're understanding the world, distrust in the pharmaceuticals, distrust in government, distrust in military force. And so people, I think, are really coming back down to basics, and we're seeing a lot of community ground up organizations starting to rise. We're seeing in the streets of the United States, for example, these enormous protests. Like we're seeing a striving and a search for meaning beyond what the current reservoirs of information have been giving us. And I'm absolutely seeing it. I'm chockers, and I'm getting more people coming into psychic development classes. I'm getting more people interested in mediumship and understanding that we don't die. Like that's another big thing. We don't die. Like our consciousness prevails and we can prove it, and also a lot of people are moving into wanting an understanding of natural well-being as well. So alternative healing and the interplay between energy and matter of the body. And I think it's wonderful, because I think it's almost feels like a coming home, to how we're designed and how we're actually meant to be operating.
Yeah. And it's almost like taking your power back to you. I think we've always given our power away. And, I'm sure will say the same. I've seen that in the wellness industry. We give our power to someone else to fix us. Oh, we'll go and check into this nice swanky hotel to feel better for 2 weeks. And then we'll just get back to our everyday lives afterwards. We'll do the juice cleanse. We'll do the yoga. We'll do this, that, and the other. But actually bringing the power back to us and our innate human being and creativity and energy and tapping into all of that is how we heal ourselves, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is definitely, that's a good point. I think there is, the needle is shifting from symptom-led healing modalities to causal-led healing modalities. So, and in my work, every form of physical discomfort or illness has an energetic root. And, whether that be trauma that's been held in the body for ages and is calling now for attention, or whether that be a belief or a fear system which is keeping the person out of alignment with their true path and their potentiality. And, eventually the body's going to scream at you if you've got this sort of grating going on between the paradigm that you're buying into and your true reality. It's got that grinding is going to express in some way. And I love that too. I love that people are moving into, even if it's psychological or emotional, why am I repeating these patterns? Why am I attracting the same kind of man? What's going on? What am I holding within me that is keeping me in this loop? This is the sort of work that I love to do, and there's just more and more of it coming in. And I think the narrative is getting better, like podcasts like this, for example, and there's great content we can all access with some interesting minds that are operating in this way. And so I think it's happening. We've got a long way to go.
But it's just recognizing, and, there's, again, great work out there. The book, The Body Knows the Score, about how we hold trauma in our bodies. And there's always been this disconnect between stress and trauma and like what actually shows up in our bodies, whether it's hips, backache, really bad digestion, burnout, all the rest of it. And as you say, the wheels are coming, people are actually starting to realize that they're connected. Duh. But when it comes to, like high achieving women who want to really explore more about spirituality and they're ready to embrace it, like what are some simple things that they can start to explore right away?
Yeah, okay. So I can only really talk to what works for me and what works for my clients as well. And the first one is to understand the true dynamics and functions of your breath. So, and breathwork workshops and 9D breathwork, and what's his name? What's his name? Hoff, thank you. All of that's super trendy and it's all amazing and it's all great. But you know, often these are just like captions taken out of very ancient, beautiful wisdom that's been packaged without the frame of reference. And so my go-to on breathwork, which is the oldest and I think the most original technology on breathwork, is pranayama from the yogic sciences. And to understand that the breath is not only, a powerful detoxer, a powerful way to regulate the nervous system, because there is a physiological connection between the way we breathe, brainwave patterning, and the function of the nervous system. And that's why we've got two nostrils, two hemispheres, and two sides of the nervous system. They are all interconnected. But also from a more, what we're talking about, like in terms of expanded awareness, is the breath which bridges us into those softer, less linear states where we can perceive psychic information and we can perceive more subtle forms of guidance, you know. So the breath, start with the breath. It's so accessible, it's portable, and there's some very basic techniques that you can start doing every day, which will immediately change your sense of well-being and create that pause point, you know, between your perception of what's going on and your interface with the actual experience. And it's in that pause point that you can start to actually reprogram your patterning, your thinking, your beliefs, your fears, and so on. So definitely start with breath. The other thing that I think is really important for busy women, because I think we're quite, because of what you're talking about, our sensitivity, is our content. So, we all sort of, to switch off, might do those sort of mindless scrolling and all of that kind of stuff, and there's nothing wrong with going and like seeing a rom-com or going to some stand-up comedy if it makes you feel good. But we need to feed our minds with beautiful, solid content, which opens us up to possibility. And the third thing I would say is our company, content and company. So a lot of us just hang with the same people because we always have, and a lot of us have our relationships in our life that really aren't nourishing. And I feel like, and I know you do a lot of work around boundary, around protecting your peace. And I just think the modern woman could really do with getting her big girl pants on and deciding who has access to her empire and who doesn't, who keeps outside the gates. And that doesn't mean you need to become strict and hard and non-accessible. It means being discerning about where you are spending your energy, your time, your attention, and the exposure to your heart and your energy body. And if it's not nourishing, if it's a crew that loves the gossip and the bitching,
when you leave people's company, how do you feel? Do you feel drained, or do you feel re-energized? And those three things that you've just told me, the breathwork, the content, and the company, again, it's all about being mindful to have the breathwork, being mindful, I'm scrolling, being mindful to do something more nourishing. When you're spending time with friends and family, being mindful, is this filling my cup up? Is this energizing me? Or are they just draining? Like, what are they adding to my life right now? I'm not saying we're all takers out there, but are they filling our cup?
And do you require a little bit of distance? And also, I think it's totally cool to have flatlined times, like in your cave and, eating soup and without a bra and you fluff yourself and going out and not forcing yourself, but getting more into rhythm and cycle of what your system is requiring and giving it to your system generously. And that cyclical rhythm, I think a lot of us are out of alignment with, and we're much better and more well when we are in alignment with it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because obviously I've been back in the UK 2 years, and Singapore has the same climate year round, and I've had to contend with good old winter. But now I changed my mindset on it. It's actually a time to slow down and hibernate and nourish your body. We're meant to slow down. We're meant to look after ourselves at a certain time of the year. And then in summer, we're all out and about hiking and doing all the activity. But as you say, you're meant to get into that seasonal cycle and just do what feels right and be mindful of what feels right too.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the seasonal foods, like, they are perfectly designed for our immune function and our well-being through different seasons. So, the citrus fruits come in the late summer to gear up your vitamin C for your resistance against the viruses of the autumn and the winter. Pumpkins, nuts, earthy type of stuff, which comes in the winter months, which grounds you, which nourishes you deeply, and the more spooky kind of berries and the mint and the herbs come in the spring to bring you out of your cave for you to connect and absorb the beauty and the sort of, symphony of life, So cycle all and season brings us in close connection with the wilderness as well. And we're not separate from the wilderness. And, so you're right about Singapore. Like I find it hard, but I nick off to I've got a little cottage in the Blue Mountains of Australia, and I slip out the back door of Singapore and to get the seasons, and to get the earth to plate food.
Yeah, it's important. It is important. And I've really enjoyed. I really enjoy the seasons, actually. I love the change of the seasons. I love the autumn when the leaves change color, and the hibernation in the spring, as you say, everything opens up and it's fresh and it blooms, and you really look at the circle of life as it is. Fascinating. And you, just to wrap this up, I want to hear more about your Spirited Living membership, because I know our listeners would love to hear about this, because you've just jam-packed it full of everything that you do, because you're multifaceted and talented. And you've packed it into this membership. So tell me a little bit more about it and how we can access it.
Yeah, okay. So it's an evolution of my offering, because it became very limited what I could turn up to. And during COVID, my client base globalized because I was working online. So I wanted to find a way and I love creating. I love writing material and as you know, I create guided meditation tracks and music for ritual. I love the podcast, all creative. And I wanted to find a way where I could have a successful business, which also will continue to fuel my goodwill impact work, and at the same time focus on I wanted to move away from creation cell. And the most obvious way for me to do that was some kind of a subscribed membership. And so it was my first foray into a subscribed community, not my first foray into holding and building community. I've been doing that for a long time, but in a different format. And so we turn 2 like in 3 days' time. And so it's wonderful. Thank you. And I've learned a lot. So I first started, I just chucked everything I had at it, and all the members were like, wow, it's just too much. And so I've learned that less is more, meaning is better. And so Spirited Living is a community of people. They're based all around the world. We're growing. We've got a 2-for-1 offer going on now, and lots of people are coming in, which is great, where it provides a variety of content in different kinds of formats, in different ways to engage, whether you want to just do it in your own pace, your own leisure, or whether you want to join live explorations together, which deepens your spiritual toolkit and which also provides content which opens you to possibility. So the sort of things we've got going in there is we've got live psychic development circles, which are awesome, all levels. Just beautiful practice, all confidential, obviously. We've got masterclasses from elders and experts in different spiritual frames. So this month, at the end of the month, we've got an ex-Zen Buddhist monk turned banker who's talking. He's very cool. Edward Howard, he's a good mate. He's talking to us about the Zen one breath method. Next month, we will start a chakra process where we explore a chakra per month with mudras, meditations, dieta, ritual. We've got another friend of mine, Bronnia West, coming in a little bit later in the year, who's been doing these 2-part mini courses in tarot. So it's a lovely sort of smorgasbord of different things that appeal to different people. And like I said, in lots of formats. I don't want it to be onerous. And then at the end of every month, we all get together for live group coaching. We've got 3 different time zones the last Wednesday of every month, and that is superb. So that's where everyone brings what's coming up for them, and we just talk it through, share perspectives, share practices. And what's always gorgeous, which I see always in spiritual communities, is that there's commonality. There are these synchronous patterns that happen when the group comes together for these lives. So that's what spirited living is. It's a plan. It doesn't matter where you are, if you're reactive to responsive or responsive to expansive or expansive to creative. It doesn't matter where you are. You know, it's just a lovely way to explore modern spirituality without the BS and all the pop crap that you see on Instagram, people with crystals, feathers pretending to be something they're not. It's really down to earth. You can see the way that I talk. It's deep, refined, but it's solid. It's beautiful, solid content. And the community is gorgeous. Like they're so supportive of each other. Lots of friendships have formed in different countries.
That's lovely. Yeah, and that's what people need today as well. Not just your amazing content, but that commonality. They're like, oh, aha moments that someone else is feeling the same or navigating a similar thing in a different country. And you're right, the friendships form, and it's that sense of community that's also equally empowering aside to all your brilliant content. And where can we find out more about that? Which website do we need to go to?
spiritedlivingwithdani.com.
Oh, easy peasy.
Easy peasy. And I've tried to, like I said, it is the modern busy people who are wanting more and seeking more. So I've tried to make it as easy as possible. It's monthly. You can opt in, you can opt out. Everything that's dropped on the platform is in the resource library, so you can go back. I'm really proud of it. I love it. And so come and check us out.
Can't wait. And what's next for you, Dani?
Oh my goodness. So what's next for me? So I did a beta test on another community platform called Spirited Business, which is taking what I've learned from successfully running a spiritual business and offering it to people who want to found or grow a spiritual business.
Brilliant.
I've had over the last 18 months about 20 people go through and they've launched. So I'm now building the landing page for that, and I've got an ongoing little Spirited Business Accountability Club as well. So that's going to come out shortly. And next year I'm going to be, I don't know when, I've been tossing it around for ages. I just need to do it, is Spirited Kids.
Oh, amazing.
A similar, less complex offering, which is a monthly drop of content for educators, parents and guardians of middle-aged children to bring in mindfulness, meditation, and start to bring some of that stuff into their life.
Oh, I think this is so important in today's world with they're all getting obsessed with tech and gaming and all the rest of it. What a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm writing my first novel.
Are you? Oh, juicy. What's it going to be on?
It is called The Hummingbird Prophecy, and it is a fiction, young adult fiction, about the impending unraveling of the environment, and there's a lot of actual current research in that. And when I started researching, I was like, this is actually really happening. But it draws from a lot of beautiful world shamanic myths which talk about the renewal. And the protagonist is a young woman, third culture outlier, trying to find who she is, and in the meantime realizes that she is the fulfillment of the Hummingbird Prophecy. So there's a bit of supernatural in there, but it's also really firmly based in some serious ecological truths that I want young adult readers to lean into a bit more. That's the plan.
Yeah, those are my favorite types of novel that actually bring in real world facts and figures and research and make it into a story that makes it relatable to everyday life, right? Oh, I can't wait to read that. I don't know how you have the time.
I love it. I love what I do.
You do, and you were a fountain of knowledge. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was really insightful as always. You just have a way with words and explaining things in such a relatable and inspiring way. So thank you so much, Dani.
Thank you so much, Linda. Always love talking with you.
That's it for today's episode of PS I Love Me. I hope you've learned some interesting nuggets to weave into your everyday life to feel a little lighter, brighter, and inspired. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more high-achieving women like yourselves to find us. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Linda Williams Coach, for more daily inspiration and updates.